Hello and welcome to another MEI Global Supply Chain Improvement Series e-learning program. My name is Alan Dunn. I'm the president of GDI Consulting and Training Company and the founder of the Manufacturing Executive Institute. I will be your host and your instructor in this important program, a better method for cross-training production personnel, building and implementing an empowered operator development program. I have to say, this is one of my favorite programs because it deals with people. You know, nothing happens in a manufacturing or distribution company, or indeed in any company, without the involvement of people. People are our most important asset. I know every CEO in the world says that. They stand on oil drums, or they stand on pallets, or they stand on a podium or a platform, and they say the most important asset are people. It's really true. It's not to be undervalued. It's not to be understated. They really are important. And the ones that are oftentimes the folks who are actually making our products, the production operators, and that's what this program is about today. This topic is urgent for three serious, critical reasons. The first is that competition requires manufacturers to become more flexible and more cost-effective, but all at the same time. So we can't just work on flexibility and we can't just work on efficiency. We have to work on both of them. And we have to do it with people. And you know, there's nothing more flexible in the production process than people. People can be instructed very easily to do something different. The question is, are they trained? Are they trained to do it? And that's what we're going to address in this program. The third reason that this is an urgent topic is that uncertainty demands a more agile workforce. Gone are the days where every operator specializes in one operation or one machine or one process. We now need operators to focus on numerous activities. And that's not just to be flexible, it's also to improve overall productivity. More about that later. Our training mission today is to provide you with some tangible solutions, some tangible ideas to this issue, or this problem of cross-training. Jeff Galvin, the senior editor-at-large of Fortune magazine and an author of a spectacular book called Talent is Overrated, a book I would encourage every one of you to read, said that for virtually every company, the scarce resource today is human ability. That's why companies are under unprecedented pressure to make sure that every single employee is as highly developed as possible. And even then, no one really knows where the limits of development are. We need to start to invest in all levels, or we need to continue to invest in all levels in our manufacturing and distribution companies. But we need to pay some special attention to the operators, the ones who are actually converting inventory, the ones that are converting cash to raw materials, to finished goods, to work in process, and then to finished goods. We need to focus on. So I'm often asked this question, what do I mean by cross-training, and particularly cross-training of production personnel? I'm talking about how to teach an operator, or perhaps a team of operators, how to completely and competently perform different production activities. How to know how to perform an activity from beginning to end, that absolute or that complete sort of process, and how to do it competently. We're talking about how to provide a means to balance operator requirements in a shifting schedule environment. In other words, in multi-product factories, multi-SKU factories, we have imbalances all the time. Anybody who says they don't have an imbalance in their production process somewhere during each day really doesn't know what they're talking about. We can calculate standardized work every single day. We can calculate line flows every single day. But as soon as you have a machine break, or experience some extraordinary demand, or have something else that damages or upsets the rhythm of the factory, then you have an imbalance. Those imbalances have to be addressed, and we can address them with people. So this is one of the things that really is important, is to train people to be able to move from station A to station Q in order to take up some of these imbalances. And the third is to increase the level of underlying production knowledge to increase the critical thinking skills of our production operators. You know, the rule book runs out every day. It runs out for more than just management and leaders. It runs out for operators. Every day, something is thrown at an operator, something is thrown at an employee that perhaps they haven't seen before. And what they need are those models in their head. We call them mental models that help them to solve problems. Indeed, as a consultant for almost 40 years, I've developed a series of mental models. For example, some of you have attended or watched some of my other programs and have heard about the problem decomposition model that I talk about. Every problem in consulting that comes my way, for 40 years, I've decomposed it into the technical components, the organizational components, the cultural components, and the individual behavioral components. And by being able to decompose a problem, I not only find a better way to drive a solution, but I find a better way to implement it. And because I understand the cultural, and I understand the organizational, I understand the behavioral issues. And that model has served me well. So these are the reasons, or this is really what's behind the need for production personnel cross-training. So let's talk a little bit more about critical thinking, because this is really important. When I say cross-train production staff members or production personnel or production operators, I'm not just talking about how to teach them to memorize how a machine gets set up or how a machine runs. I'm talking about how to get them to feel, to understand, to know how to set it up, to know how to run it, but to actually how to feel how that machine works and to understand what feeds it and to understand where products from that machine are going to go next. And to do that, we really have to work on not just the memory sort of skills, but we have to work on these cognition skills. Now, if you think about how an operator performs, you think about how anybody performs their jobs, anybody that is who has high critical thinking skills, you'll discover that they first have a problem or they have a situation put in front of them, and they try to interpret it. Follow around on the circle, and you'll see where I'm going. And then they have to kind of regulate. We call it self-regulation, where they're really identifying kind of the themes of the problem so they can then analyze it and then find a way to explain it, usually to themselves, sometimes to others, and then how to actually evaluate the actual problem. And from there, they can start to draw some inferences and ultimately, through purposeful and reflective judgment, come to a series of solutions. If you want to look at it in a more linear sort of focus, they tend to identify problems. We want operators not who just know how to run a machine, but know how to identify the problem and then figure out what the real question is that they're trying to solve or trying to address. And then they have to understand that problem or that issue or that machine's operation in the context of the entire production line. They need facts. They need circumstances that surround or frame the issue or the problem. They need to then identify choices, the 2, 3, 4 potential options of how they can behave, how they can act, or how they can run the machine. And then they analyze their options to try to figure out what the best solution is. And then they can actually list their reasons explicitly. I did this because I came to this conclusion. And so when we talk about cross-training, we're not just talking about how to take somebody from machine A and have them run machine B. We're also talking about how to get them to understand the nature and the character of machine B and how it fits into machines A, B, C, D, E, and F. Now, there's 9 reasons that we've identified for cross-training. The first is that it prevents job stagnation, which helps in employee retention. This may not actually be the biggest and the most important, but it's a very important reason in a 3 to 3.5% unemployment economy. It would be an important reason even in a 10% economy, because good players, good performers, we call them A players, always have another place to go. And we would rather have them stay if they're an A player. Second reason is that it offers a learning and professional development opportunity, which again helps in retention. Third reason is that cross-training can rejuvenate all functions. This is more of a psychological reason for cross-training. Data from surveys continue to demonstrate to us and continues to prove that highly cross-trained factories, the individuals in those factories have a greater sense of self-worth. And it tends to rejuvenate them when they believe that way, when they go from less cross-training to more cross-training. In fact, every survey we've reviewed suggests that the employees actually feel better about themselves and the company. And this is because it tends to improve their understanding of how different functions within the enterprise fit together and how they work together. So they get a sense not only of how that machine works or that area in the factory works, but how it fits into the rest of the factory. That, of course, results in better coordination and better teamwork of the individuals. And it tends to erase the differences, the enmities, and the unhealthy internal competition. And so we see people will actually compete less in a cross-trained environment because they have great empathy for the other jobs, well, because they do them themselves. A lot of increased knowledge, know-how, skills, and work performance, improved overall work team motivation and performance, and ultimately a better achievement of organization goals and objectives. So you can see there's a lot of reasons for cross-training. And by the way, I didn't even mention the improvements in efficiency. I didn't even mention improvements in productivity. And so you can see that cross-training of people has great value. Indeed, in one of my clients, it has a factory in Malaysia and a factory in the U.S. They're identical factories. If you look at them from the street view, they look the same. If you walk through, they look the same. Every piece of machinery is identical. Every piece of machinery is in the same place. The only difference is the type of landscaping outside the buildings, because one's in the subtropics and the other is in a desert area. And yet, the one in the U.S. has almost 30% more employees doing exactly the same volumes. The one in Malaysia, the average employee can run 9 different machines. In the U.S., they can run one. And so ultimately, from an economic perspective, it makes sense to cross-train as well. But it also makes sense to cross-train because all the investments are oftentimes made before a person even touches the parts or touches the machine. So in all our programs, we have these moments of wisdom. These are things that we believe you should never forget. To run a factory, you need, starting at the bottom of the pyramid, you need the production environment, the building itself. You need the machines, the machine controls. You need fixtures to hold the material. You need tooling to work the material. You need the material, and you need the operator. Without the trained operator, the one at the top of those 7, all of the expensive 6 foundational inputs below it will be wasted. So think about this. You're not just losing product, creating scrap or rework. You're losing time that was used, that was consumed. And time can never be reestablished. You can never get time back. Once time has been expended, that time is gone. And so operators that are unskilled can cause an enormous waste of assets. Think about the production environment, the machine controls, the tooling, the fixtures, and the material. All of those are assets. If we don't perform on those assets correctly, then we've wasted shareholder-invested assets. So think about that for a bit as you go forward, that without the trained operator, you've just squandered assets invested by the shareholders. So let's talk about why cross-training, though, never seems to work, or often seems to fail, unfortunately. One of the top reasons is that cross-training programs are not well thought out. I've seen this 100 times. They're confusing to operators. No one can explain them. They've made them too complex, and there's just too many rules associated with the cross-training program. Little incentive to the operator to learn multiple skills is provided. So I'll just jump the gun right now, and we'll see it later. A person who can run 9 machines is worth more than a person who can run 1 machine. Cross-training will never work and will never be sustainable unless your company is willing to pay differently for a highly cross-trained, breadth of knowledge, breadth of skills individual. That doesn't mean you can't compensate for depth, for expertise. But if a person can expertly run 9 machines, that person is worth more to your organization that can run 1 and therefore should be paid more. It's very clear to me, and we've seen this, again, we've done this in hundreds of companies implementing these kinds of cross-training techniques, and in every single one of them, we start to reduce the total employment base, and we save a lot of money, and some of that can be passed back on in the way of incentives. Third reason that cross-training doesn't seem to work in some companies is that management really doesn't understand the enormous benefit. They don't understand the reduction in total labor force. They don't understand the value of camaraderie. They don't understand the value of eliminating enmity and internal competition in the factory. They don't understand the value of a true, smooth running, agile factory. Another reason that management oftentimes sees cross-training as some administrivia sort of process, and it really is perceived to be an HR issue. So HR is involved because that's their job, that's their role. But we're going to suggest that operations leadership should really drive this, and drive it by taking the idea of cross-training away from HR and handing it squarely to the key operators in the factory. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And the last reason for failure oftentimes is that cross-training programs are designed, just as I said earlier, too complex, and they're not easy to explain. So let's talk about kind of the impediments. Pull from there the impediments to implementing a good cross-training and developing of an agile workforce sort of program. First, don't over-intellectualize this. This is about getting individuals trained across multiple machines. Let's not over-intellectualize it. Another reason that oftentimes these things don't work out, or it's an impediment, is that we're not involving the operators in the design of the program. And where we're going to go in a minute is to make a recommendation that the operators will drive the implementation of cross-training. They will not be an impediment, and management will allow them to drive it. Another impediment is that production management oftentimes doesn't see cross-training as a priority mechanism to reduce costs and improve factory resource utilization. They think it's an industrial engineering role, or they think it's a human resources role, but they don't actually buy into it being something really important to the overall performance of the factory. I will tell you, my experience is the largest impediment is always production management not taking the idea of cross-training seriously. And the reason is few production management professionals have worked in a highly cross-trained environment. That environment I talked about a minute ago in Malaysia, that environment, everybody worked about 9 or more machines. And if you haven't worked in that kind of environment where you have employees who can work from one corner of the factory to the other corner just with a little direction, you don't know the benefits of that. You don't understand it. It's the same problem we had when we went from pre-MRP days and planning to post-MRP. A lot of executives didn't get on the bandwagon because they just didn't understand it, and they couldn't see how it would benefit the companies. We saw the same thing with just-in-time techniques and Kanban techniques implemented. We saw the same thing with a lot of lean manufacturing. We definitely saw it with operator-driven statistical process control. So management won't take this seriously unless you educate them appropriately in what it could look like. So here's a new approach. Let me suggest a new approach. Let's allow factory operators to be in control of cross-training. You heard that right. Let's take it out of HR. Let's turn most of the process, not all of it, but most of the process over to the operators. Let's try to minimize HR's involvement other than defining the framework of this. Take them out of the process and let's give it to the operators. Let's segment the operators by known skills. So a leader of the factory, a production manager, maybe with some industrial engineering assistants, goes to the factory and talks to all the operators and asks them, on this particular machine, let's say the Freon bubble test machine. I just made that up, but let's use that as an example. The Freon test bubble test machine, we ask everybody who runs that the best. Who do you see who runs it the best? And pretty soon we'll triangulate around 1 or 2 individuals. We're going to call those masters. We're going to identify the masters at every work center, at every machine, certainly in every process. And people will know who the masters are. I don't have to have elaborate testing schemes. I don't have to have elaborate competency model development at this level. All I need to do is go and talk to the individuals that either give them work or take work from them, either upstream or downstream of where these operators work. They will know. In every project we've done to implement operator-centric cross-training, every single one of them, we have found the masters from the people in the organization. And then what you do is you build a qualification process, working with the masters. You go to the masters and you ask them to run this machine as well as you run it. What do you need to know? And how do you get here? And here's what they invariably will tell you. They'll tell you 2 or 3 or 4 other machines that one has to learn first. They may tell you about some basic geometric principles one needs to understand. They may talk about basic functional knowledge of blueprint reading or process control diagram understanding. They may talk about some terminology that the person needs to understand. So they'll walk you through all of that. They'll tell you the prerequisites. And then you'll start talking to them and you'll ask them, how long did it take for you to become extraordinary, to get to the point where your colleagues defined you as a master when we talk to them? And you then codify that into a qualification or development process. It says to run the Freon bubble test machine, you need to work on 3 specific other machines a year each before this. You need to learn these X, Y, and Z principles, and then you need to work on the bubble test machine under the tutelage of the master for 140 hours. And we establish that, and the master signs off and says, that's exactly what I think needs to happen. And so you build that qualification process, and then you design the adjustments to pay depending upon the quantity of skills as well as the quality of skills. This is a step not to be missed. If you're unwilling to pay for breadth of skills, you shouldn't do this, because all you will do is antagonize your people. You will cause labor, strife, and unrest like you've never seen before. And if you believe that this is going to actually help you to reduce total labor spend, and if you believe that this is going to build a higher performing, perhaps even smaller though, workforce, then you would understand that there's money in there to compensate these individuals more. And then clearly communicate the process to each operator, including the rewards and the penalties. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but you want to make sure that they understand for every machine they operate, they get a little bit more pay. So I have one client where every machine that one learns and is then qualified as a master ups your pay 3%. It flat out ups at 3%. And after you get to 10 machines, then it starts to increment at 4%, or maybe it was 5%. So the point is it tries to get people to drive towards bettering themselves by seeking cross-training. And then you have to enforce those rewards and penalties. The issue is not so much about enforcing the penalties, in other words, not getting cross-trained. It's about making sure the company compensates appropriately at the reward level. So I give you an example of how this worked in one of my clients. So we identified the masters. The masters we put on their badge a pin that said, I am the master of this particular machine or this particular area in the factory. And I defined what it takes to become as good as me and for this job. And that definition is you have to work 3 other jobs, and then there's some prerequisites, and there's some fundamental knowledge base. And then you have to work under my tutelage for 140 hours. And then when you get to that point, I will look at you and say, that person is a master. I, a master, the original master perhaps, deem this new person to be a new master. It's kind of the journeyman apprentice sort of role. And I take you out of apprenticeship. I make you a journeyman. In this case, we call it a master. You can call it whatever you want, by the way. And I sign off, and I issue your certificate. I, the master, issue your certificate, and I put the pin on your badge, and I hit the button in the computer that sends the entire company a press release that Alan is now a master on the Freon bubble test machine. In other words, we enforce the rewards, or celebrate them might be a better way of saying it, as well as the penalties. So here's kind of a step or three big issues that we need to look at when we develop this operator-centric cross-training program. So let's start again with job identification. So you first have to identify every job, every machine usually, and sometimes there's multiple different types of jobs that are pretty wide in terms of requirements. So we probably want to look at all those as well on any particular machine or machine area. Define the knowledge and the skills that are needed, and then define the prerequisite jobs that they have to have. And then, of course, define how the master got there with their terms of their skills, and et cetera. And then you take a look at the master who does this. So the master's role starts with you first identifying the existing masters and then getting their agreement on skills and prerequisites. If you do what I suggested in getting them engaged in the development of the prerequisites, this will go very, very quickly. And then you execute the training. So actually, you don't. The masters execute the training. Employees are encouraged by management to seek cross-training whenever they can. So leave it to the operators. So imagine that Mark is a master on one machine and Julie is a master on another machine but wants to learn Mark's machine. So she has a choice. She can either go and look at the prerequisites and identify that that's where I can go next, and then work with Mark to put together a process where when she's done with her work for the day, she can come over and work with Mark. That will encourage her to do her work faster and better. My client in Malaysia had a real interesting scenario. They set it up where everybody's paid for 8 hours a day, but if you can get your job done in 6, you can leave and go home. You can go to the beach, big thing to do in Malaysia. You can go hang out at the beach for those last 2 hours. They'll still pay you for the 8 because they set production output standards and expectations, and if you can beat them, you can leave and go have fun for the day. Or you can go to a master and start learning his or her machine. In other words, let the choice be the employees, not the managers. The master actually executes the training. The person comes over to the master. He or she hands them the sheet of paper that says, if you want to learn this machine, you have to go through these other 3 machines. Check, check, check. Okay, you've done that. You have to demonstrate to me some basic knowledge in trigonometry or basic knowledge in geometry. Check, check. Now you got to work. You got to run this machine for 140 hours. So you're over here for 2 hours today. Go ahead and run that machine. I, as the master of this center, will watch you and counsel you and coach you and give you hints along the way. And I'll do that every time you come over here. So 2 hours today, maybe an hour tomorrow, maybe skip for 3 or 4 days, another 2 hours. And at some point in time, I will determine that you're as good as I am. And so we have a guideline of 140 hours, but if you get it at 120, I might actually give it to you earlier. But on the other hand, if you don't care and you don't work hard, I may never give it to you. People say about the time I say that, people start thinking that the masters can play games. And we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes, because our experience has been they never play games. The masters that you identify, there's no evidence that they're going to play games to keep people from getting certified. The masters execute the training, and then they're the ones who actually certify the individuals. They're the ones who actually give them the award, actually put a pin on their badge, and announce to the world that this person can now run this machine as well as the other machines they run. We also take that data and we post it. We post it where every employee and every manager and every executive will walk by it every day if possible. We post every factory employee skills matrix, probably somewhere around the factory or the business entrance. We let everyone know who is solid and who is vulnerable. This is about peer pressure. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, that may not be fair to Frances by showing that she only has one or only knows 2 machines, and everybody else knows 6 to 10. Well, I'm sorry. We want everybody to know that Frances only has 2 machines We also want Frances to know that she's only got 2 machines in her body of knowledge or body of capabilities. And she may be okay with that. Now, there's some times where it's not okay, and we're going to talk about that again as I finish up this presentation. But we want to post this. We want everybody to know it. And again, the masters are responsible for identifying for every name on the chart who's a master and who's not a master. This does not need any HR involvement whatsoever. People have said to me many times that they feel uncomfortable with the idea that this can be managed by the operators in the factory. And I always remind them that when we went from material requirements planning, MRP, to a just-in-time, or let's use, say, a Kanban system, we went from a system of planned order releases and planned order receipts calculated by planners and by computer systems in the office. We went from that to Kanban cards that circulate through a factory. And so any item could have 3 Kanban cards or some number of Kanbans with a standardized container quantity. And if you look at what a Kanban card, really what it is, it's the removing of the planned order release and receipt out of the planning department and handing it to the operator who's actually going to touch those parts. So all Kanban really is MRP, where the planned order releases and receipts are actually in the factory, controlled by the people at the point of use. If we can trust them with that, we can certainly trust them with training other people and being certified. So here's some considerations I want you to think about. Let's start with certification. So masters are the only ones in this scenario who can certify new masters. We allow them to apply a little bit of judgment. Over here, you see it on the right side, you see Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is an employee at the Maple Street Enterprises, and he has 6 machines that he's capable of running. All those are pins on his badge. So you can walk through the factory and you can see how cross-trained the organization is, or how cross-trained it isn't. Certification by the master is actually a big deal, because this is the person that these same people early on identified as a master. So the same people who identified an individual as a master, then to get certified by that individual, that's not being certified by somebody in HR. That's being certified by Yoda. You saw the Star Wars movies. Yoda was the all-seeing, all-knowledgeable, wisdom-centric little creature. Well, this is probably not a little creature, but it's still a knowledge-centric individual, and we build them up in our organization as journeymen or masters. In terms of the rewards, multiple skills, as I said earlier, have to be compensated. You cannot run this without compensating them more. Multiple skills are less vulnerable during layoffs. So one of my clients in San Diego, California area has a system. And so when it's time for a layoff, because companies have cycles, and once in a while your company's going to go through that, they would walk through the factory and look, as jokingly as the plant manager said, I look for the people with the really good tans. Because invariably, when they finished up their production, instead of going to work with another master to learn a machine, they chose, again, it was their choice, they chose to go to the beach. And he said, so it seems like the people with the fewest pins have the nicest suntans. He was joking, of course, but what he meant was he walked through the factory and he looked for individuals who have the least pins. And so if you're looking at Bob Johnson here, the bottom right-hand corner is the 500 work cell. And so let's imagine that we walk through the factory and we get to the 500 work cell and there's a person with 1 pin. It says 500 work cell. We look around and see how many other people have 500 work cell pins on their badges. And if we find 8, 10, 12, 15 people with number 500 work cell pins on their badges, then that person only has 1 pin, the 500, isn't really needed. Because in an agile factory, we probably have ample number of people who can cover that work cell. So multiple skills are going to be less vulnerable during layoffs, and their fewer skills are going to be more vulnerable during layoffs. And so the penalty, obviously, is that in times of economic tolerance, low pin count employees are the first to be laid off. It's kind of a new policy. You lay off from lack of breadth before you lay off from lack of depth. Now, that's probably not 100% applicable. There's one or two processes in every factory I've visited that really goes to deep technical knowledge of usually one or two individuals who, by the way, usually put the company at enormous risk as well, which is just to say other people should be trained for that role. So probably no other penalties other than pay, penalties or rewards should be applied. The fact that everybody in the organization knows who the masters are because it's posted, that takes care of the psychological reward. The money takes care of the economic reward. People now start to feel valuable. So time for another moment of wisdom. You trust production operators to run very expensive machinery, often with significant quality and safety consequences. If they're smart enough to do this, why aren't they smart enough to cross-train each other? I want you to think about that. You know, the past honorary chairman of Toyota, he thought about that a lot. Fujio Cho said that lean depends on people and leadership skills. He said a job of a leader is to go see the work, ask why the work is done, and show respect. He said, if you build a culture of go see, ask why, and show respect, then you will start to get improvements. And those improvements will be implemented in a world where 46% of improvement initiatives fail due to lack of leadership. So this leads us to our last moment of wisdom. If we can't trust our production operators to effectively cross-train their colleagues, then I want to meet the HR professional who's allowed our company to hire untrustworthy people. So I'm not buying the trustworthiness argument, and neither should you. We start with trust until it's proven otherwise. And so in every one of these projects we've done, we've discovered that there are engineers in the heads of almost every operator if you'll just let them out. And operators that are trained in multiple machines get something from each of those that even help them in their primary job. And they become better critical thinkers about their primary job, even though they're cross-trained on numbers of other machines. So that brings us to some final thoughts that I would like to share with you as we wrap this up. So we did some surveys across about 105 companies that were doing cross-training, and most of them were doing cross-training very effectively and very aggressively. And here's what we discovered. Some of these are in ranges because there were quite often there were ranges in performance, and some are just hard numbers. In terms of production employees, what we discovered is aggressive cross-training should reduce the production workforce by 25 to 35%. And by the way, there was no indication that level of automation changed this number. Some of them were highly automated, some of them were not. There was no evidence, and there could be someday, but in this case, there was no evidence that automation or level of automation impacted this. 43 to 88% is a big range, fewer missed shipments. But at the bottom end, we saw less than half of the missed shipments that we would see in an uncross-trained environment. Greater than 70% reduction in work-in-process defects was reported across the board. So everyone reported more than 70% reduction in work-in-process defects. Now, a lot of that's because when they cross-train to an upstream or a downstream, so they see where the defects occur, and then they turn on their engineering brain and they start working on those. We saw greater than 22% reduction in the labor component of cost of goods. So if labor was running, say, 20% of cost of goods, a 22% reduction takes about 4 points out of that. That's huge. That's 4 points right to margin, gross margin. And then we saw a range of about 6 to 11% improvements in gross margin. In other words, gross margin went up 6% to 11%. You can't argue with those numbers. These numbers come directly from companies that did this. While there's ranges, all the ranges, even at the bottom end, are very attractive. And this brings me to a critical insight. Good production operator talent is hard to find and even harder to keep. To believe that you are not going to have to continually invest in ongoing development and cross-training, even of production people, is really foolish. By not developing your production employees, your business will be at enormous risk of losing your A players. When you lose your A players, that forces your company into the constant rehiring cycle, which of course increases the output, quality, risk problems. And so we have to accept that cross-training is important of existing employees and future employees, and that training in general is an investment and not an expense. With that, I would like to thank all of you for attending this program today. My name is Alan Dunn for the Manufacturing Executive Institute. Thank you for attending another Global Supply Chain Improvement Series e-learning program. To find additional relevant and useful programs, go to www.mfgexecutive.com. Now go and make a difference. Bye-bye.